So, starting in verse 40, so just as the weeds are gathered up and burned with fire, so shall it be at the end of the age. So notice, Yeshua's breaking the parable down, and notice the sequence once again. Verse 41, the Son of Man will send forth his angels, right there, the reapers, and they will gather out of his kingdom. Notice the sequence. They will gather out of his kingdom all stumbling blocks and those who commit lawlessness. Verse 42, and they will throw them into the furnace of fire. In that place there will be reaping and gnashing of teeth. Right? That's verse 41 and 42. That's the wicked being taken first. And then notice in verse 43, he turns around and says, then the righteous will shine forth like the sun in the kingdom of their Father. The one who has ears, let him hear. So in this part of the parable, the ones who are taken sequentially first are the wicked, the tares. They're taken in judgment, and then the righteous are left behind to enjoy or inherit the kingdom prepared for them by our righteous Father. Yeshua himself also told his disciples, behold, I go and prepare a place for you, and if I go, then I'll return and gather you unto myself, that where I am, there ye may be also. So we know the famous passage in John. So notice that the righteous kingdom is prepared for those who genuinely name the name of Yeshua and believe in God as their God. But it's first that the wicked are kind of taken out of the way. They're removed out of the picture. So that's one perspective. But then as we begin to keep looking at more of these details in Mark, again, we're working our way towards the little commentary that David Guzik had prepared for us. Let's look at Mark 13, starting in verse 28. Now learn the parable from the fig tree. As soon as its branches becomes tender and sprouts its leaves, you know that summer is near. So you too, when you see these things happening, recognize that he is near, right at the door. Again, he's giving us the general sense of that when the time comes for Yeshua to return, that the urgency of the matter will be felt by those of us who are watching and waiting. In fact, he commissions us, so you too, when you see these things happening, recognize that he's right at the door. When he's speaking to believers, he's telling us, look, don't be in the dark, don't be clueless, but watch and wait for my return. Indeed, watch for the signs, right? That was the opening salvo of questions from the disciples very early on in the book of Matthew, chapter 24. When will be the sign of your coming in of the end of the age, right? Oh Lord, tell us, when will these things happen? And he could have just told them right up front, guess what? No one knows the day or the hour. You're not even going to have a clue. There won't be any signs. My return will be imminent. Right? I don't even know when I'm coming back. Heck, if I don't know, then why should you even care about it? Just go about your daily lives. Don't try to figure anything out. There will be no signs that precede it. It will be imminent. It could happen before you even finish your sentences. So just don't worry about it. Is that what he said? Nope, it's not what he said. Instead, he lays out all of these clues, these signs, these things that will precede the time frame of the end. Okay, so keeping with that, he says in verse 29, so you too, when you see these things happening, recognize that he is, doesn't say recognize that he is imminent, it says recognize that he is at the door. The word right there isn't really in the Greek, but it's filled in by this version of the NASB. Recognize that he is near, right at the door. Verse 30, truly I say to you, this generation will not pass away until all these things take place. Heaven and earth will pass away, but my words will not pass away. But about that day or hour, no one knows, not even the angels in heaven, nor the Son, but the Father alone. And then notice there's nothing starting in the next section in Mark about the Noah reference, right? If you look at it, he didn't say anything about as it was in the days of Noah. He just talks about no one knows the day or the hour. But then he does go talk about the whole thief in the night kind of analogy. Someone, I'm sorry, not the thief in the night part, but the master returning to his house. And in another passage, he talks about the I think it's Matthew later on, where he talks about the one who breaks in. But notice starting in verse 30, watch out, stay alert, for you do not know when the appointed time is. It is like a man away on a journey who, upon leaving his house and putting his slaves in charge, assigning to each one his task, also commanded the doorkeeper to stay alert. So therefore, Yeshua says, stay alert, for you do not know when the master of the house is coming, whether in the evening or at midnight or when the rooster crows or in the morning. so that he does not come suddenly and find you asleep. What I say to you, I say to all, stay alert. So the general sense is that Yeshua is addressing two groups of people: his believers, his followers, his disciples, and by inclusion now us, as we're reading these words. And there are the general humanity who's not going to be reading these words, and yet Yeshua is describing them, that they are going to be completely clueless. So even though the world at large does not know and cannot know what is going on because they have rejected the truth, they've rejected God, they rejected the Messiah, they're not reading these words of our Master here, they don't care. On the one hand, we have those people. On the other hand, we have believers who fall into the camp of you can be sharp, you can be alert, you can be ready and watchful and waiting, or you can be slacking off. You're still part of the group who's counted among the Lord's followers, but you too can risk the danger of letting the cares of the world garner all your attention and steal away your devotion to God, etc., things like that. So he is warning believers to stay alert. So we still have that aspect. But now let's jump into Luke real quick, and then we'll turn over to David Guzik's commentary and work our way through some of that. Starting in Luke 17, all at verse 22, and he said to the disciples, "The days will come when you will long to see one of the days of the Son of Man, and you will not see it." Verse 23, "And they will say to you, 'Look there,' or 'Look here,' do not leave and do not run after them." So I'm backing up a bit to catch the context. Now we got to start in verse 24, and notice he's going to start talking about his coming, his second return, which if it was imminent, he wouldn't really give us any signs. In other words, the signs would be worthless if it was truly 100% imminent. But there are just too many details given, not just by Yeshua, but other places in the Bible that, and I'm not going to deal with this now, I'll deal with it when I get to rapture in the next three topics 8, 9, and 10. But, I'm sorry, let me look at my schedule here. Topic 10, 11, and 12. But there are just too many details all throughout the New Testament, and even in Daniel, that give us the impression that imminency is not really what Yeshua was teaching, at least not up to a point. At some point in time, when all of the signs have been given, and all of the other portents and what do we call them? Harbingers. Harbinger? I always get that word pronounced wrong. It's one of the two. When all of these warning signs have run their course, and Antichrist has been revealed, and the tribulation has started up, etc., etc. At some point in time, yes, his return will be imminent, as will be the day of the Lord. But up until that point, no, I don't believe he's teaching imminency, but I do believe he's teaching expectancy and urgency. So that's the view that I'm going to go with. So look here in verse 24. Yeshua says, "Just like the lightning when it flashes out of one part of the sky and shines to the other part of the sky, so will the Son of the Man be in his day. So will the Son of Man be in his day." In other words, his second coming will not be secret. There will not be a secret rapture. There will be a rapture, but it won't be secret. In fact, when we get to Paul's writings, we're going to find that he's going to announce his arrival with a shout, with a loud trumpet blast, the voice of the archangel, etc., etc. That doesn't sound like any secret to me. So Yeshua says, "But first he must suffer many things and be rejected by this generation." We're reading in verse 25, and now we're at verse 26. Now we're going to get into the days of Noah terminology or verbiage, and so that's why I brought in Luke. So notice we're going to get some more details here that we weren't given in Matthew, particularly when it comes down to the separation between the two people. We're going to get the 2 men in the bed terminology. "And just as it happened in the days of Noah, so will it also be in the days of the Son of Man." Verse 27, "People were eating, they were drinking, they were marrying, and they were being given in marriage." And as I mentioned earlier, there's nothing sinful or wicked about the fact that people are eating, drinking, marrying, and giving in marriage, right? There's nothing wrong with that. In fact, those are all good things that the Bible describes for all of humanity to be engaged in: eating, drinking, marrying, and giving in marriage. In fact, how is the human race supposed to continue on unless we marry, give in marriage, and produce children, right? These are all good things to do, but in the context of the way Yeshua is describing humanity at the time period when he returns, this is something that's going to be a bad thing for humanity because it's describing business as usual to the degree that they are not looking and watching and waiting for God to return to planet Earth in the person of his son Yeshua. At the same time, it also describes the general sense of that even though there will be tribulation happening all around planet Earth, that people won't be catching the warning signs about that the end is near. So it's almost strange that people will be eating, drinking, marrying, giving in marriage when, according to the earlier parts of Matthew, with the birth pangs or the beginnings of sorrows, as it shows up in other passages, Antichrist will be on the scene, but he won't be known yet. He'll be incognito. There will be a measure of peace in certain parts of the world, particularly Israel, and sacrifices will have been resumed in Israel. But there will also be all of these, the four horses of the apocalypse. The different colors, the white, the red, the black, and the pale. There will be all of these earthquakes and famines and shortages of food and things like that are also going on on planet Earth. And then the tribulation is going to break out around the midpoint of the week, the abomination of desolation, etc., etc. And yet still, Yeshua says people will be eating and drinking and marrying and giving in marriage until the day that Noah entered the ark. So, humanity is just absolutely asleep at the wheel, even though there's all these signs around them that indicate that something supernatural is happening. There will be demonic activity. There will be supernatural signs in the heavens, right? The sun, moon, stars, and earthquakes and things like that. But still, people are just going to be going about their trying to make some sense of normality. So Yeshua says, right up until the day that Noah entered the ark and the flood came and destroyed them all. And one thing I want to highlight for you is that when we read here we go. When we read Matthew, in Matthew 24, verse 39, it says, let me highlight it like that for you. In verse 39, it says, and they did not, speaking of the wicked humans, they did not understand until the flood came and did what? Took them all away. And the verb here, took, is repeated down in verse 40 and 41, where it says, at that time there will be two men in the field, one will be taken, and one will be left. And then verse 41, two women will be grinding at the mill, one will be taken, and one will be left. And a lot of Bible teachers seize on this opportunity with the three verbs, took, taken, and taken. But when we get over to Luke, Yeshua says they were marrying and being given in marriage until the day that Noah entered the ark and the flood came and destroyed them all. What happened to our verb took? Well, it's not used here in Luke. He uses a different verb, destroyed them all. All right, that's going to play into our little narrative here in a moment. So let's keep reading. Verse 28. It was the same as happened in the days of Lot. We also get some extra details that Matthew didn't record for us, but that as it was in the days of Noah, now we have the days of Lot. And we know the story from the book of Genesis there. But Yeshua gives it to us anyway. They were eating, they were drinking, they were buying, they were selling, they were planting, and they were building. Same general sense as it was with Noah. The idea is that people aren't paying attention to the signs around them. Verse 29, but on the day that Lot left Sodom, notice Yeshua twice now has emphasized this idea that on the day that destruction befalls humanity, that same day, righteous people are separated away from the wicked people, or there's a separation between the two. The day that Noah entered the ark, he actually even says that. But then here in Luke, he says, on the day that Lot left. And then we're going to see a little bit later, he just says, he's even going to emphasize it more. He's going to say, on the same day. So he says, in verse 29, on the day that Lot left Sodom, it rained fire and brimstone from heaven and destroyed them all. And then verse 30 says, it will be just the same on the day that the Son of Man is revealed. On that day, let's keep reading. We're in verse 31 now of Luke chapter 17. On that day, the one who will be on the housetop with his goods in the house must not go down to take them out. And likewise, the one in the field must not turn back. Remember Lot's wife. Why? Because she did turn back. And what happened? If you remember the story, she turned back, she turned around, and she looked at Sodom and Gomorrah as it was being destroyed, and she turned into a pillar of salt, or a pillar of, like a rock pillar, a stone pillar. In other words, she died. So remember Lot's wife. Yeah, don't pull a Lot's wife. Yeshua continues, verse 32, whoever strives to save his life will lose it, and whoever loses his life will keep it. That's cryptic, right? But we don't have time to deal with that right now. Verse 34, I tell you on that night, there will be two in one bed. Now we have the two in one bed analogy. One will be taken and the other will be left. Now we're back to our taken and left analogy. Our taken and left language, and he uses the verb taken, just like he had in Matthew. And according to Tim LaHaye and the other author of that book, the Left Behind series, the ones who are taken are the believers, and the ones who are left behind are the unbelievers. That's according to that book series. And there are a lot of pastors who disagree with that based on what we just read earlier in Mark, where the ones who are taken are the ones who are being judged in wickedness. The tares were taken and gathered first, and the ones who are left behind are the righteous. Okay, so which one is right? Who's right about that? Let's keep reading. Verse 35. There will be two women grinding at the same place, right at the mill in Matthew. One will be taken and the other will be left. Who is taken? Who's left? Is the wicked one taken in judgment and the one that's left behind is the righteous one? Or is it the opposite? Is the righteous one taken to be with Jesus in rapture and the one left, the one that's left behind to face the judgment that befalls all the rest of wicked humanity? We'll find out here in a moment which view that I take. Starting at verse 36, two men will be in the field. One will be taken and the other will be left. And then verse 37, and responding, they said to him, where, Lord? And notice they ask a question that in Matthew's rendering showed up a lot earlier in the narrative. But in this version from Luke, this question shows up near the very end of his analogy about the taken and the left. So they said to him, where, Lord? And he said to them, the disciples, where the body is, there also the vultures will be gathered. And I've heard, well, I don't want to get ahead of myself. So those are some of the details that we're going to begin now to unpack and begin looking at using David Guzik's commentary that I have in front of us. And we're at about 22 minutes left in the study, so we've got plenty of time to back up now, work our way through this. So I'm going to read a lot of this commentary without trying to stop and explain a lot of it, since most of it's self-explanatory. So this is found, by the way, at www.enduringword.com, all one word, Enduring Word. I put a little link to Pastor David Guzik's commentary in the descriptions of the YouTube videos that you're watching for this particular series, in case you want to follow along on your own. Pastor David Guzik, I'll flash a little picture on the screen in post-production of what he looks like and the name of the website as well. But Pastor David Guzik is a Trinitarian believer. As far as I understand, when it comes to tribulational perspectives, he's a pre-trib rapture believer, meaning he believes that the tribulation is 7 years long, like classic dispensationalists. He believes that the church will be raptured prior to the 7-year tribulation. That's why he's labeled as pre-trib, so pre-trib rapture, which I myself do not hold to that perspective. If I were to bring up a there we go. If I were to bring up a chart that shows you real quick what kind of perspective. Oh, did I have it? Did I not open the right one? I don't see it here, but this one shows the 70th week of Daniel and the rapture showing right in the middle, just prior to the tribulation. But I'm not holding that. I'm a let's see, is this a pre-wrath chart? This is kind of a bit of a pre-wrath chart, but it's not the chart that I was looking for. But nevertheless, pre-wrath places the rapture sometime after the midpoint of the 70th week of Daniel. So sometime after the midpoint, about halfway through the second half. So we'll deal with that a little bit later. But so I hold to a pre-wrath that the rapture will take place after the tribulation, but prior to the wrath of God being poured out. Meaning I make a distinction between the wrath of Satan, aka the tribulation, and the wrath of God, aka the day of the Lord. But we'll deal with that later in the next topic. So Pastor David Guzik is going to talk now about these verses that we just read, and I'm going to read down through most of this section without stopping so that we can get it onto the recording and into the video. And most of it is self-explanatory, and I've done a lot of explaining on my own. Sorry about that. So, starting in verse 36, Jesus says that the day and the hour of his return is unknowable by men and even unknowable by angels. And then we have the quote, "But of that day and hour no one knows, not even the angels of heaven, but my Father only." So now notice what Pastor Guzik begins to point out for us. Of that day and hour no one knows. Here Jesus refers back to the original question of Matthew 24:3, what will be the sign of your coming? His answer is somewhat unexpected, saying of that day and hour no one knows. And then the next section. To give this idea the strongest emphasis, Jesus claimed that this knowledge was reserved for his Father only. If Jesus himself, at least during his earthly ministry, did not know this day and hour, it emphasizes the foolishness of any later person making certain predictions regarding the prophetic timetable.